South Africa has avoided getting into a technical recession with GDP for the first quarter of the year on the upside with a 0.4% increase. So what does this all mean? And we take a look at the sectors that have contributed. We're joined by Economist Duma Gqubule. Thank you very much, Duma, for your time this afternoon. You've probably had time to dissect the contents of the data. Firstly, maybe overall, what does this tell you?
It was a bit difficult to dissect the data while we were following the memorial of Eusebius Makaisa, and I just heard what Ridi Tabi was saying. She said that Eusebius's agenda was a South Africa that was progressive and thriving. That is what we've lost in South Africa since 1994. In terms of the last quarter GDP statistics, I don't think there's anything to say positive about it. Quarter on quarter, it is an increase of 0.4% on a low base, which was a decline of GDP in the last quarter of 2022. The more meaningful one is the year-on-year trend, which is 0.2%. So there are many ways of looking at that. Is that maybe businesses have become resilient and they found ways to cope with load shedding and pass on the increased cost. But the context in which this is happening is that our GDP per capita has not grown for 15 years until 2022. From 2009 to 2019, there was no growth in GDP per capita. After the COVID shock, we now have an ESCOM shock. The economic outlook is worse than it was before COVID during the last decade. So by the year the forecast is 3 more years of declining GDP per capita until 2025. So what that means is that by 2025, we will have had no growth. In fact, the economy on per capita terms will be lower than it was 18 years before. Now, this is a situation that we cannot allow to continue. And I think South Africans must be obsessed with this issue of getting our economy growing, because we can't continue to have a situation where we have 11.9 million unemployed South Africans and an unemployment rate of 42.4%. For Africans, it's about 47%. For African females, it's about 50%. We have to get this economy growing because we can't be celebrating a pedestrian increase in GDP of 0.2% year on year during the first quarter.
Where is the fertilizer? What happened to the fertilizer when you speak of stimulating the economy? You remarked that there's been no progress and South Africa has not thrived. We have not seen that, or we lost that in South Africa since 1994. What do we put that down to?
I think we must put it down. It's simple. I've looked at the economy the last 29 years, 30 years. Our economy grows when the government invests in its people and its infrastructure, as happened between 2003 and 2008, when the economy grew by 4.45% a year because the government was investing in its people and its infrastructure. We created 3.1 million jobs as well. Now, what happened is that the government has stopped investing in its people and its infrastructure, and we have had a collapse of all infrastructure in the country, whether it's electricity, water, hospitals. I was reading about Helen Joseph this morning. I do not understand the logic of a government that refuses to invest in infrastructure, because infrastructure has got what we call high multipliers. If you invest 1 rand in infrastructure, the economy gets more than 2 rands back. So what that means is that it generates the income to pay for itself. So I can't understand why would the government for 2 decades not invest in the water infrastructure in Hammanskraal and the surrounding dams. It makes no sense whatsoever. Because when you invest in infrastructure, you're buying goods and services in the economy and you're stimulating the economy. I just don't understand it. Yeah.
But you see, South Africa is a country with a lot of plans. So we speak of the New Growth Path, the National Development Plan, the Growth, Renewal and Sustainability Plan, the Economic Recovery and Reconstruction Plan, and we can go on for days with the plans that we have on paper that seemingly do not translate to ground level. But in 2023, the quality of life of people has not changed in South Africa. What then needs to be done by the people of South Africa? Have we become that numb?
Yeah, we can't become numb to this level of, lack of economic performance. Half of our population lives in poverty. 1 in 5 does not have enough food to eat. And we are the most unequal country in the world. And we have to say no to the way the government is running. And I was really pleased that since the Reserve Bank announced its irrational increase in interest rate, there's been an unprecedented South Africans, no, this makes no sense, it's irrational, why are you increasing interest rates? But the same must apply to National Treasury, which is refusing to, who's announcing these austerity policies. So you can't grow the economy when the government is reducing spending and when interest rates are going up and Eskom is not providing the power. So the immediate priority right now is to get Eskom working and the electricity working in the short term. We can't afford another day, another week, another month of these power blackouts. We thought they couldn't get worse than 2022, but by May 10th, we'd already exceeded what we lost in what the energy we shared in 2021. So I believe that there should be no budget constraints when it comes to Eskom. We must do whatever it takes to get it working. And yes, that's my personal view on the issue here.
Fair enough. How should then we understand, because we oftentimes hear that you speak of being the most unequal society in the world, that is structural, it is systematic, it is designed. And so in 2023, when we take a look, you speak of irrational decisions being made where the economy is concerned by the relevant bodies or authorities. What then should we understand about those structures? Do they still exist, one? And number two, when you take a look at the performance of certain spaces or companies in the economy, while the everyday South African may not see that translate into their lives, there are people who are benefit. And so in whose interest is it that South Africa remains the way it is?
I don't understand. Maybe the people who benefit are the people who invest in our bond markets, because the foreigners who invest in our bond markets and they get these excess returns, the financial sector. But the majority of the financial sector continues to grow. We have financialization despite this unprecedented economic collapse. You must have seen in their profits recently, they got more profits, yeah. But that's not the issue. The issue is that we have to, you talked about inequality. The drive of inequality is unemployment, number one. Number two is our education system. I'm a big believer that we should have free primary, basic, and tertiary education. Education should be seen as an investment in our people. And if you look at countries that manage to reduce inequality, they have mass access to education. They have universal education systems, which means that the population that is enrolled in tertiary education is in excess of 50%. I'm talking about 75% in the rich countries. So currently we're at tertiary enrollment rates of about 20%, and we should get more access to education, and that is the biggest driver to inequality. I once watched an interview with a CEO from I think Norway, and he was saying, the person in my business below me, the reason they have inequality in that country, in Scandinavia, is that the lowest person in the business, they were in school with the CEO. So we must create one education system. We must equalize our education system, which we didn't. We must equalize our health system. And I can't believe the level of opposition to this national health insurance system. We must create a quasi-public institution that will engage the trust of all South Africans to equalize our health system as well. Yeah.
When we compare ourselves with countries on the continent, where would you put us? Because we oftentimes hear that South Africa has got some of the best policies, the best constitution, because also almost half of the population is dependent on social grants, and that then means that, well, we're doing much better, especially than other countries on the continent. Is that so?
Well, like right now, we don't have an option but to give increased social protection. For example, we have the inflation crisis in the country at the moment, the inflation situation. It's higher for low-income groups, the lower income groups. So the government must provide some kind of income support, as happens in other countries, to be able to to cushion the impact of that for the most low-income people. So I do think that we need, number one, to get this country going, we need a quick shock to the system through a universal basic income grant, which I believe should be given to the child support grant must be converted to the universal basic income grant, and it must be given to adults 18 to 59. We also have, that's the first that gets our economy growing. The second lever that we also have to get all the institutions in our country aligned towards a GDP growth target. I'm talking about the Reserve Bank and National Treasury. These are the most important institutions in our economy. So what we have is a situation in South Africa where the Reserve Bank only cares about inflation, the National Treasury only cares about debt. But we have this National Development Plan, as you're saying, which wants 5.4% annual growth, but nobody is responsible for achieving those targets. That is why we're not achieving the targets in the National Development Plan, because nobody is responsible for meeting the targets in the NDP. So the central bank must be responsible for meeting those targets, the growth targets, and also the National Treasury. I believe that is how the countries in Asia and the fast-growing countries in Africa, Rwanda, Ethiopia, that's how they operate. You know, they have an annual growth target that focuses the mind of every institution in the country. And you can't have one institution saying, no, we don't care, we don't need to have this growth rate. It's not our priority, we're prioritizing something else. Yeah.
Thank you very much to Economist Duma Gqubule for your time.